Hi, I'm Darci Griffith Gamerl,
I'm David Downing.
and our duo is the BEL CANTO duo. We've been working together since we met in 2016.
Hmm.
It just kind of naturally came out of our relationship as we're both musicians and really have a passion for chamber music and started creating our own style of music. And it's all classically based as we both come out of very traditional classical conservatory schools and training, but we were looking for a different way to reach people and to express ourselves through music.
David, you have been a solo artist for a long time. How was it for you to start working in duo?
Well, I've done a lot of chamber music in the past, but yes, for a long time I've been just playing by myself. It was great to start a duo. I had really stopped playing a lot before I met Darci. I wasn't playing very much at all. It brought me back into playing music, to be playing with music with her, and it's great. It's been very inspiring, and it's made me see music in a different way. Um, and also writing together is a new experience for me as well.
Would you like to talk a little bit about your repertoire?
We do a mixture of works. We discovered very quickly that there isn't a whole lot out there for
Yeah.
oboe and cello pre-existing. So we have done a lot of writing for our group. We also do arrangements of standard repertoire, favorites from opera and film. Really just a wide variety of things. And sometimes it comes about through, requests from people either for particular events or a theme. We've done different dinners with like a Spanish theme, and so we pulled a lot of Spanish music for that and Latin American music as well. And then the classical stuff that we've found, some of it we've just adopted and arranged, some of the things that we like to warm up on every day are the inventions by Johann Sebastian Bach, which were originally penned for keyboard, of course, but they are a great way for us to kind of connect and make sure that we're communicating on the same plane and just kind of start out the day in a good way. It's never a bad thing when you start the day with Bach, so.
Yeah. We've also had a couple of pieces written for us. Did you talk about that?
No, actually.
Yeah.
Basically, because of the pandemic, we started working together in 2016, and when things shut down in 2020, it was a way for us to really refocus, as all of the orchestral work and extra things that we had been doing just weren't happening anymore. And so we were contacted by a composer in Italy, Fabio Mengozzi, and he asked us to take a look at his music, listen to a few things, and decide if perhaps there was something that we liked about his writing, and then he would write a piece for us, and in exchange then we would perform the piece, and he would have that performance to add to his resume. So we did that. He wrote us a lovely piece called Sole di Cristallo, and it's kind of evolved from there in terms of people writing things for us. There's a composer in Arkansas who has written a piece for us, Robert Mueller, and we're going to be performing both of those pieces and our own original work at the International Double Reed Society Conference coming up this summer in Boulder, Colorado. And that's one of our kind of unanticipated things that we have come across in terms of our, body of work, and that the newer pieces that are being written are much needed, but then also kind of writing our own and adding to that whole body of work.
So, how do you organize your day?
It changes every single week, every single day, depending on what we have coming up. So this week we have a performance at the National Music Museum. We're doing an art exhibit
Tonight.
Yeah. An opening, providing music for that. A good friend of ours is facilitating that at the Kaneko Museum, and a few other performances as well. So it's It's a challenge, for sure. But basically, depending on what we have coming up that week or in the coming months, we lay out, what we're going to do. We generally work better in the afternoons or evenings, so we will do, kind of business type things. I have marketing Mondays where, we'll reach out to people, contact people about booking and that kind of a thing as part of like the Nebraska Touring Artist Program. We're based out of Omaha, Nebraska, so that's something that we have added to our schedule with regard to marketing, applying for grants, that kind of thing. So then in the afternoon we'll rehearse. In fact, that's what's slated for today. And then in the evenings we'll go perform or maybe do more rehearsing or have family time, that kind of a thing. So
yeah.
So David, you said that Darci was a little bit of a muse, a bit of a guardian angel. Also, she kind of convinced you to embrace music again in a different way, maybe because you're a duo now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how was it for you to make such a big change?
It was definitely challenging. I had to start practicing again. I had been working as a house painter for years, and finally last June I was able to completely stop that doing that type of work. Because as a musician, if you're not working a lot, as a musician, you need money from other sources. So those, all those years of work, that type of work was very hard on my hands. So it really took me a long time, a few years to get back to the level I was, say, at the end of, when in my early 20s. And I'm still working hard. I have a lot further to go, hopefully.
But that's the nature of art, right? I think everyone
Yeah.
does. It's this constant, I wouldn't say pushing, but it's constantly working on your craft, on your art, and continuing to grow and develop what you're saying and how you're communicating with people.
How do people respond to this duo?
They're very receptive. We've been told that there's something really magical that happens between the two instruments, and whether that's because of how we play together or the instruments themselves, it's hard to say. But I think it has a lot of potential to reach a great deal of people. The reception's been really good.
A lot of people talk about the experience facilitating many things for them. After our last performance this weekend, an elderly woman came up to us and said, "You misspoke." She said, you didn't speak correctly. And I said, "Oh, okay." And she said, "You shouldn't have said that you are doing healing music," because we also incorporate singing bowls into what we do. She said, "You are restorers of souls." And it was just, it just brought me to tears because she felt like she couldn't go on. And after that performance, she said she felt like she could make it, through the coming months and year. And she said the same thing to David separately. And so, and that's why we're doing it, is to reach people on a different level, whether it be, just allowing them a few moments to escape, to perhaps journey elsewhere, or like this woman, to feel like she can, move forward with life and bring a smile to people's faces. That's really so rewarding.
So you play classical music and you also play more spiritual music.
Yeah, although we don't necessarily say it that way, I do explain the power of the singing bowls and how it can help facilitate healing within the body, and the power of music itself, right? So it, neurologically is activating so many different areas of the brain, which we now can see thanks to enhanced imaging technology. And that's just amazing how it affects people, whether it helps them to calm down. David does a lot of his solo work on the street, and there are people there that are very disturbed that will come and just sit and listen, and you can just see them settling and grounding. And so I guess, yes, that's kind of what we do, but we wouldn't like overtly say as such, although we have worked with a number of different sacred organizations, churches of all different kinds, temples and that kind of thing.
David, what's it like to work with the public as a duo member?
I don't think it's any different really than working with the public. You know, as a soloist, or it's pretty much the same.
We alternate as well in our performances, so we'll do, and for several reasons, but we'll do some pieces with the duo, and then we alternate with David's work on solo cello with his looping station. It provides a totally different atmosphere for people and kind of texture.
It does. And as far as communicating with the public, I'm not good at that. When I perform, I get extremely nervous actually speaking, and that kind of seeps into my music. So I don't like to spend a lot of time communicating with the public on a speaking level. I feel that I do that through playing. Yeah. I was 6 years old, about to turn 7, and my parents had noticed throughout the years that I demonstrated an affinity for classical music in particular. When I would ride my bike, I would have a little radio attached to it, and I would play the classical station when I was, 5 years old, 6 years old. My parents also listened to a lot of classical music in addition to Latin music. My mother's from Venezuela, actually. So I really liked all kinds of music, but I think I preferred classical at the time. So for my 7th birthday, I believe, had offered to have me take lessons on an instrument of my choice. So I went to see guitar classes, violin master classes, viola classes, I think piano and cello. So they took me to 5 different instruments, I believe. Was that 5 that I said? And I immediately gravitated towards the cello. I wanted to know how these notes came out of the hand motions, and the tone was very gripping to me, as the cello is noted for having a tone most like the human voice than any other instrument. And I think that was part of what I was also attracted to. And after that, I received lessons for 2 to 3 years in the Suzuki program, and I went through the program very quickly. And then I started to take more serious classes with a teacher here in Omaha. After I went to Florida when I was about 12 for 1 year, and had a couple teachers there, and then came back with one of the premier teachers in Omaha. I studied with for 4 years until I won a scholarship to go to Interlochen Arts summer camp. I was the governor's scholar for their summer program, so I went tuition free. And after that, I came back to Omaha. And after a few months back here, I realized that I needed to be more challenged and be around more people like me. So then I went to the Arts Academy, the middle of my junior year. I think it was 1990 or 89. I'm not sure. There, I studied music for another year and a half, and I wasn't practicing as much as I should, so I kind of ran out of schools to go to until there was one school that presented itself that was in Florida that was tuition free, and it was kind of my last audition, so I practiced very hard for that. I got into that school, and then I decided I needed to. It was a very small program, so I felt like I wanted to be in a more challenging school, I guess. I was also dating an opera singer at the time who was going to this school in Cleveland Institute of Music. So I practiced and auditioned mid-year for the Cleveland Institute of Music, and then I was accepted to study with Alan Harris at that school. I basically had to start over as a freshman, and then I spent another 3 years at the Cleveland Institute of Music until I kind of burnt out of classical music and decided to play in bands and kind of live an alternative lifestyle, if you would. Then I spent, several years improvising and playing in different bands in the Cleveland, Ohio area. And then around 1999, I sort of stopped playing cello due to some unforeseen circumstances. That's a story for another time. And then I ended up back in Omaha about 2 years later and started playing again a little bit. I went to college again. I spent a year with my old teacher who was teaching at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. I went for a semester so that I could kind of get back into playing. And then after that, I stopped going to school again. I'd been working as a painter for years at this point, so I started doing more of that. I still played, just not quite as much, and definitely no classical for a long time, basically until I met Darci. And then we started our duo, and kind of started slowly performing at different places, and now we seem to be doing fairly well.
I noticed that you're playing on different cellos. Would you like to present them?
I actually only have one cello now, but I can present it. So this is a cello by modern maker Anton Kreutz. He's a luthier out of Kansas City. He studied in, I believe, Italy and New York. He studied the Cremonese style of cello making, and I personally think he's one of the best makers around, and it's just a beautiful instrument. I've had two of these. So one of the cellos that was in some of the videos, I'm sure, was his, and his was destroyed at an art opening where someone tripped on a rug and fell right in the middle of it. And then
A human mousetrap.
yeah, it was actually a friend of mine, and he said it was kind of like a human mousetrap because there's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of pounds of pressure that are centered on this bridge piece. So when he fell, it kind of just engulfed him. So anyway, so thank goodness for insurance, because I had been playing on another cello at the time that was at a shop, and it was, I think, Wilhelm Stopka, a maker out of Chicago. I think he might have been Czechoslovakian, but that was a wonderful instrument. And then, but very inconsistent. So I traded that one for another of Anton Kreutz's cello, but I did not like the cello quite as much as my last Anton Kreutz. And then this one appeared in his shop one day, and I tried it, and I was just amazed at the sound. I mean, it was just incredible, and it's gotten even better. I've played on just amazingly expensive instruments, and I haven't found one that sounds nearly as good. So my goal though is to go to Europe, and because I'd love to have a second instrument. Just yeah, it's always good to have two instruments these days. I have three bows. I could present those as well, but yeah, so that's how I ended up with this one. Yeah, I know there's several instruments in the videos though. I'll get two of the three bows that I have. This bow here is a collaboration between two bow makers. One is from Sweden and the other, I believe, is French, Johansen and Fournier. They joined together as a collaboration to make this bow. One of the best bows I've ever played with. And then this is a wonderful chamber music bow that I happened across, I think last year or maybe a year and a half ago. My friend had it in his shop, and it is from the 1800s. and it's French, but there's no maker. So who knows who made it? It's a wonderful Pernambuco bow, as almost all fine bows are Pernambuco. I do have one more bow. It's from the same shop as the cello in Kansas City. It's by a Russian maker named Lev Sobol. So there you have it. There's my instruments that I play on.
Did your South American background influence you?
Absolutely. The music definitely influenced the way I write. Some of my pieces have a very definite Latin influence. And then when I was at Interlochen Arts Academy, I had friends from Turkey, Iran, Ghana, and many other countries. And I was exposed to the music of these countries because I would give people money to go, when they would go back home on vacation, to bring me music. So through listening to all this different music over the course of my life, it's kind of just seeped into the way I write. And I don't really try to copy the styles. It's just something that remains in my head. And in my writing process, I don't write stuff down. I don't try to sound like a certain culture. It just kind of flows out whenever I write. So. I have no training in composition. I have musical training. I took theory classes and whatnot, but never any formal composition classes. I started writing music when I think I was about 15 years old when I simply started playing a piece that came to me from who knows where. I was in the mountains of Venezuela, and I enjoyed improvising a lot at this time. So I just sat down and I started playing a piece that came into my head. And to this day, I play it. I've recorded it. All my pieces are kind of like that. I've never really sat down specifically to compose. I purchased a loop station a while ago, which is it's a device that you play a phrase and it records it right there live, and then you play it back. So when I discovered these electronic devices such as a loop station and a delay pedal, so I think I began to write more, especially discovering these devices, because I could play something and then improvise to it. And that's basically how I write. Now, though, I'm starting to realize that if I want to expand my compositions and perhaps write for orchestra and write with Darci, I have to kind of discipline myself and actually write down the music, and it's all about the evolution of composition. And I do know how to write in pretty much all keys, clefs, and whatnot. So there's a story behind that.
How was it like for you to play for different kinds of audiences?
That's a great question. The street performing, I'll start there. I have been doing that since I was about 18 years old. I've played in several cities, mainly though here in Nebraska, in the Old Market, which is a very almost European-like atmosphere. One of the reasons I do the street playing is for exposure, and also it's just this freedom of expression, and you know, the joys of just, first of all, playing, and then I love the conversations and all the different reactions that I get out of it. And if you look back throughout the course of history, street music has been happening since the beginning of music, really. As far as the audiences, the next one I will go to is the club or bar audience, which also is a great atmosphere for me, I think. The lighting is great, and also the freedom of improvising, which is what I do when I play with a band, whether it's a rock band or folk or any other type of band. It's usually just completely free improv and flowing. And then there's the classical audience. I had a lot of problems with nerves early on as a performer, and I still get the most nervous when I'm on a stage with the lights in front of a very quiet audience, although that's been getting a lot better lately the more I play. When I was young, it was terrible. I could be completely prepared, and then everything would go out the window when I was on stage. But it's getting a lot better these days, especially the more I do it.
Are you planning on doing other solo acts?
I always get asked to do solo performances still, especially with the loop station. I've kind of found a niche where that music is requested a lot, and I plan on recording 2 more albums in the very near future. But the duo is also picking up a great deal. So, I'll be doing both as much as possible. I have taught in the past. I have not. I have not taught in a couple of years now. Probably since COVID. I was teaching at a small music store, basically, right as COVID hit, and then I was asked if I wanted to do virtual teaching. And with the cello, it's fairly impossible, especially with beginning students, to teach them how to hold an instrument properly or bow properly without being able to physically help them position their hands on the bow or the cello for that matter. I do have an interest in teaching in the future, but right now it's one of those things where I don't want to take on a bunch of students if there's not going to be the time and my plan. I think my plan is to be quite busy and travel all over the place. So a student needs a consistent, weekly or bi-weekly person that can teach them, and that right now would not be me.
Who would you say influenced you the most?
I'd have to say in high school, definitely my teacher, David Lowe, here in town was a wonderful influence and helped me, learn. Took me to a really great level in playing before I left and ended up at Interlochen. I've been influenced by so many artists, from Miles Davis to Lynn Harrell. As far as sound, I think Lynn Harrell is probably the greatest cellist tonally that there was. My teacher in Cleveland, Alan Harris, was very instrumental in developing my technique, and I still think that things that he taught me are to this day still getting better and working. It's a very hard question for me to answer. I'm influenced by almost all amazing music that I hear in the world. Really. I've tried to write, and I don't like my writing, so I suppose I could write. No, I don't personally think I have that kind of talent.
You seem such an introvert artist.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm assuming that even though you are an introvert, you have a very rich and active internal artistic life.
Yeah, I do. It's very internal, and it's something I really have to work hard to bring out. I have all this music inside of me, and it's very hard to channel it sometimes. It's something I'm working on is just trying to bring that creativity out and working much harder to get it out into the world, for sure. I grew up partly in Venezuela. My mother, I was actually adopted. So my mother's from Venezuela, my dad is from Philadelphia. I spent a large portion of my childhood in Venezuela. So every summer, and I think I spent a year there when I was 2, or half a year when I was 2, a year when I was 5, and almost every summer throughout my elementary school and junior high, and parts of high school, but I mainly grew up here. So.
What was it like meeting Darci?
It was like I'd met a long lost friend. We just talked about music. I was playing at an open mic at a music venue in Omaha. After I played, I sat down and we talked, and we've been together ever since.
So I grew up in northern British Columbia in Canada, a small town called Vanderhoof. And there was always a great love of music in my family. My grandfather played the violin, and he played in the Vancouver Symphony, I think when it was first started as a community orchestra. And as a young boy, he had taken lessons, I think, from a trapper. He helped him out with his trap line and then would stay with him and get lessons in exchange for his help. So that was my mother's side, which is mostly English based. And then my dad's side actually came up from the United States when he was a young boy as ranchers. And so that side of the family also had a great love for music. My grandmother played piano very well. So that was passed down to me. I was impressed by the memory of my dad playing trombone, although really he only played in high school. So I started at a young age, with recorder in first grade, but didn't come to the oboe until about 8th grade. I had tried the clarinet and other instruments and just really did not enjoy them. I wanted something that was different and interesting and a challenge, and the oboe is definitely that. It's known as one of the harder instruments because not only do you have to master actually playing the instrument, but you have to master the art of reed making, which is an entirely different skill. Very fine woodworking, essentially. So I started in Canada, did some of the music camps over the summer as we were able to afford it. The one that I attended most was the Courtenay Youth Music Center. It's no longer around, but it was a camp on Vancouver Island in Courtenay. And there were premier faculty that came from all over Canada. Many Toronto symphony players came. So it was that exposure to music that made me really fall in love with playing and the study of the instrument and the challenge of it. And I remember vividly hearing the Nutcracker being performed at one point, and that's when I really, knew that this was the instrument for me long term. And I was very involved in sports in high school as well, mostly basketball, and was doing both quite a bit, but decided when I was looking at college that I really needed to focus on my passion and my first love, which was music. And so I ended up in the United States on scholarship at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And I finished my undergrad there and then continued working. I auditioned for grad schools and was accepted at the Cincinnati Conservatory and went and did my master's there, and then took some time off and had been flying to Chicago to work with Eugene Izatoff, the former principal oboist of the Chicago Symphony. He's now with San Francisco. Mostly because I'm very much a lifelong learner in terms of, I love learning. I love learning new things and continuing to grow and develop. And so I felt like also because of where I had grown up, that I still had much to learn. So I went to Chicago and studied for 2 years at Roosevelt University. Chicago Conservatory of Performing Arts is also what it's known as. And while there, I worked with Peggy Michael and had coachings with a number of the other Chicago Symphony faculty and other guest artists that came in. After that, ended up back in Nebraska and have been here pretty much ever since. We stay, mostly for our 2 girls. They're still in school, and so although we're starting to, travel more for work, and particularly with the duo, this is kind of our home base. So I play the oboe and English horn, which is essentially the tenor version of the oboe. It's a double reed instrument, and so we use bamboo cane to make our own reeds. And this whole process is also something that has afforded an income for me. I make reeds for several different organizations, different music shops, double reed shops throughout the United States. And I also make them for myself and my studio for my students and other people around the country and the world, essentially. The English horn is a little bit of a bigger instrument, and I have a very special instrument. It is made by Paul Laubin, a maker that recently passed away. I believe he was in his 90s. He was one of the best known American makers of oboes and English horns. And this English horn is made out of cocobolo. It is known as the red English horn, very much like the red violin, if you've seen the movie. It was kind of it's a red color anyways, the cocobolo is, but the maker cut himself very badly when he was making this particular instrument. So it has literally his blood, sweat, and tears in the instrument. And it has a very gentle, beautiful sound. So that's something that I very much enjoy playing. I play on a actually British oboe right now, the Haworth oboes, but grew up playing on Larays, which are made in Paris. And that's what most people play on here in the United States market, although more and more people are moving to marigauds, also made in France. And well, there are several different makers, but yeah, Haworth is the other one that a lot of people are switching to. So,
how did you decide that these instruments are for you?
When I switched to the oboe, I wanted to do something that was unique and different, and also what was needed in the band at that time, or, you know, in my middle school and high school. So there was something about the sound that I really loved. My grandfather had sent us recordings of orchestral music, all the major violin concerti, and also volumes of like the Lawrence Welk Show and Bob Ross painting and these different things. But it was really wonderful for us kids, my sisters and I, as we were exposed to all sorts of different kinds of art. And with orchestral music, that was something that was always very calming for me, that I loved. So I think that's probably where the sound of the oboe was first ingrained. And then when I saw the nutcracker, and in particular the sound of the English horn in the Danse Arabe, I decided, you know, that this was for me. And oddly enough, there was a couple in town who were selling what they thought was a clarinet that their daughter had played when she was in high school, and as it turns out, it was an oboe. And so that's where we got my first instrument. Yeah, it's something that, you know, when you first start, unless you have a really good source for reed making and reeds, you sound fairly awful. And so I did sound quite terrible for many years. It's always surprising to me that I didn't give up. But that's what I also look for in my students. If they have that tenacity and that drive and determination and perhaps just stubbornness and refusal to quit, that's kind of what I look for in a student, because if they have that, they'll stick with it. For me, working with a number of different orchestras, I came to the conclusion that I needed more personal gratification and fulfillment in my art. And I felt that way for many years, and interestingly enough, there's a book by Janet Ingle that's called The Happiest Musician. It just came out. She's an oboist in the Midwest. And she cites the job satisfaction of orchestral musicians being on par and possibly lower than prison guards. And I think that's very depressing, right? And I've seen that in my colleagues. And so for me, I've always wanted to do more, making things happen, I guess a rainmaker of sorts, because I've always felt like I've wanted to work with people on a much more intimate level, a closer level, and also to speak to them in a different way. And I don't want to make any assumptions here, and I certainly don't want to be offensive towards anyone that has dedicated their life to their work in classical music, because that is something that is extremely beautiful and pristine, I guess, in a way. And I absolutely love orchestral music. There's nothing, there's no way to describe what it's like to sit in the middle of an orchestra when you're playing a Mahler symphony and, you know, seeing how that affects people. But what I was looking for was a way to make a more intimate connection, to reach people in a more personal way. I've always wanted to be a healer, but the traditional healing arts and medicine, that kind of thing, never appealed to me at all. I remember volunteering as a candy striper in our local hospital, and although I liked visiting with people, it just, that whole thing was just not for me. Wanting to reach people in a different way, in an alternative way, is something that I've been exploring through a music healing certification. I'm also working on an inner MBA program, which is all mindfulness-based and ethical based business, conflict resolution, really just learning how to facilitate healthy ways of living life. And I guess that's what it boils down to for me. It boils down to a balance and having creative freedom. So I think in addition to wanting to reach people in different ways, what I love about doing my own thing, whether it be as a soloist or with the duo with David, I greatly value my freedom, whether it be to work anywhere in the world or to be able to say what I want to say creatively in my writing. There's something that is really invaluable with that, and also very deeply rewarding. Yes, I write music, and then I also have a blog. It's called Music Mercenary. I just started it again after a several-year hiatus. And it talks about a number of different aspects of the business, you know, and my experiences as a freelance artist. I think one of the expressions is the interstate orchestra, you know, where you're doing all the regional orchestra work and driving everywhere and playing and stuff like that. So I enjoy writing the blog, but also I write music. So for me, I did some electronic music and different compositions in school and then after graduate school, but it all started around 2019. So I was kind of reflecting on the new year, as we all want to do about at that time, and I had a dream, of vision of sorts, of this Aztec dancer that I had seen years ago, probably about 10 years prior. And in the dream, this individual was standing in front of a huge tsunami that was headed straight at him, and his arms were outstretched, and he has this amazing, beautiful headdress. I took photos of them when they were dancing, and I saw them in Utah, and didn't think anything of it until this dream happened. And what came to me out of that vision or dream was to create. So I started writing, and the first piece that I wrote is called The 7 Directions. It incorporates singing bowl and cello with looping station, and then oboe and a couple different percussion instruments, maracas and a rain stick. And it's based on the Native American belief that there are these 7 directions. So there's the traditional 4 then you have the earth, or what is below, what is above, and then the self. So the inner workings, the inner life. So I use different musical inspiration in these different directions. You know, from the East we have the Hava Rabbah scale, which is used a lot in Jewish music. I incorporate some Gregorian chant elements, a tango, and different things to kind of evoke these different areas. And then it's just gone on from there. I've written a handful of different pieces, and then now in our latest project, which is a interdisciplinary art exhibit here at the Gallery 1516 here in Omaha. It's called Flatwater, and it highlights visual elements filmed from the different rivers in Nebraska, and you know, the Milky Way from the Sandhills in central Nebraska, different areas. And so we are writing together for the first time to put together this piece. So that process has been a little bit different. I write mostly at the piano, also by ear. So I guess my approach, instead of the way that David talks about it, is kind of just tapping into that creative flow. And I do that, but in a different way. That undercurrent is there always, and I just do it at the piano and with finale and notate it that way.
I know that you have a very solid background in classical music and also other alternative types of music. Did the shamanism influence you in any way?
Yes, I believe that it has. I've worked with different spiritual teachers, and I would say it was actually a meeting with a shaman, a friend of mine, that basically sparked a lot of personal changes in my life that I needed to make. And essentially it was simply a conversation that took place, and it was kind of a random meeting when we first met. And then I asked him to meet with him again because I was curious about kind of his background, and I felt like there was more there that we needed to delve into. And so we met and talked for several hours, and then it was after that where I felt like that was a definite turning point for me in my life. And I'd worked in meditation and mindfulness over the years, but that was definitely a turning point for me, a catalyst perhaps, to make the changes that I needed to make in my life at that time. And then, as the universe does, brought different things to me, including David after that. So the night that we met, actually, I was coming home from a gig, and it was extremely cold, bitterly cold here, like a minus 15 Fahrenheit or something like that. And I saw the shooting star that just went on and on and on. It was unbelievable. So I knew something was going to happen. I said, I don't know what what it is going to be, but it's going to, something important is going to happen tonight. And that was the night that we met. Yes, I'm open to any questions or issues that people might want to address. Basically, there are a lot of different ways to reach people or to communicate with them. And we all have our, I guess, trauma that we carry with us. So it really depends on the person and what their issues are. We deal with those sorts of things in very different ways. For me, I listen to what people have to say and then can approach it. A lot of times it's the nonverbal stuff, what isn't said, that is really where the meat of the issue lies. So what we do with our music is kind of facilitate what needs to happen. So I'm also a master Reiki practitioner, and so that's part of that. You just hold the space, right? And that's what we do in our music. You facilitate. So you hold the space, you make a safe place for people. And then what is ready to be released or faced is dealt with. And so a lot of people come to us with those sorts of things. One lady talked about how her husband, who had passed, was there with her that night, and it was just an incredible gift for her, and she thanked us, and it was for somebody's birthday party celebration. So it's not something we openly talk about usually. We just facilitate it in a concert setting, and I think that's really what is key, right? So what a lot of people see when they think of classical music is this very stuffy, entrenched way of performing music, and God forbid you clap in between movements because you might get glared at, these kinds of things. So the idea is that we provide a different kind of way of enjoying music, and hopefully on a different, deeper level.
People from different walks of lives can come to you because you both had this rich lives, rich past. You brings baggage, but in fact, you have a wealth of experience. And
Yeah.
this wealth of experience helps you to understand those who come to look for healing. For sometimes even healing is such a long process. It can take years, and it's not like, I'm coming and in an hour I'll get better. The truth
No,
is,
and we're still both going through that process as well. So, yeah.
What I would say is, first of all, what is your motivation? And when you're seeking healing, I think the first thing that is really important is to be truly honest with yourself about what your battles are, okay? And we all have them. And then if you're able to really be honest with yourself and face that, and quite possibly, and this might be the hardest part of it, forgive yourself on some level, and that can come in stages, right? Because that isn't something that happens overnight either. Then I think that healing process can start. It can start. But it is a process. It takes a long time, years really. And I think having different practices that create time and space for you to see what surfaces are really key. So having time to really ground yourself. One way that I've heard it talked about is like a snow globe, right? You shake the snow globe and your thoughts are flying around, like the snow in the snow globe. And then it takes a little while for everything to settle. And then once it settles, you can see what's there. You can see what arises for you, whether it's something that you need to deal with or come back to, right? Because it's a process every day. Like I know for both of us, working closely together as a duo, it's continually a process of trying to like reconnect and making sure that it's a symbiotic relationship. And one thing too, and this is something that we talk about just the other day in our composition, there's this whole idea of the power of music and how it can actually change your brain waves. Changing your brain waves to more of a relaxed state. And a lot of people can do this in meditation using binaural beats and that kind of a thing. And you can do it in music as well. And so what it does is it forms a type of entrainment for people so that they can change that wavelength. And then it goes to a place that's deeper for people where they can relax and get out of the fight or flight mode. And then that's where the healing and change can occur. Because when we're feeling that we have a safe space and that the brain shifts into that lower, deeper brain state or brain wavelength, that's when it can happen. So the science is there, and it's facilitated in a number of different ways. The bowls definitely reach people in that way pretty quickly. Some of the elements in David's writing that I think have always been there. And then the writing that we are doing together is exploring that as well.
we live in a world that's far from perfect. You see dysfunctional situations
Yes.
everywhere. So I'm assuming that you're getting a lot of people coming with such, backgrounds. How do you help them using
Uh,
music as a medium?
that's up to the individual. I only find out through what people say about my music and the experiences they've had and the journeys they've taken, what they go through. I've never intended or set out to heal people. Um, I mean, I just play and write music. So any experience that somebody finds that is healing to them is something that luckily the music has facilitated. I guess.
Well, everybody learns a little bit differently, right? Whether you're a tactile learner or an auditory learner, or somebody that is visual. I think one of the neat things about David's music and his writing is his use of the different pedals. So visually, when he is playing, it's a very peaceful kind of look. And this is just what happens when you play. I don't know. It's certainly not intentional on your part, but he is very much at peace with himself, and it's like he's just facilitating that flow. And so then, if you're a visual learner, you can see the different pedals and different things that are layering the sound to create this full, almost orchestral-like atmosphere that just washes over you.
But then people have also said that they've visualized entire scenes, maybe from the past or future or just just very. I think I channel into people's creativity as well. I've been told, I mean, several times, countless times, of what people have experienced visually and, with closing their eyes and physically. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, for those that are more hands-on, we used to, facilitate people to like try the singing bowls, but they're quite fragile. So now what we do if someone is really interested in, the instrument, we have them come up and either stick their hand in the middle of the bowl or to the side of the bowl, because what that does is the sound vibration itself, it almost feels like static electricity or something living. It just emanates out from the bowl so they can feel it. And that is something that, in terms of the healing music that the bowls do, that it just kind of encompasses you. And we've done this, with a number of different people, and people that have really zero musical background are always just amazed by what they feel when they hear the bowls and, and when we're playing, but specifically the bowls. There's something so pure about that sound and the way that it comes across to people. It's really fascinating. And, what that brings up in people, it really depends kind of what they're going through. You've had people that will just come sit and listen. Usually this is on the street. They'll come up in tears, or they'll sit for a while and just release stuff.
And that's really
because of what they're going through.
The great experience for me is meeting people where they are, which is on the street, somewhere where they wouldn't expect to find anything like this, and especially parents with kids. Well, I've had the children or the parent ask, can their child put his hand, on the cello and feel the vibration, and it's really an incredible experience.
How do you take care of yourselves?
Well, there are a couple of ways that I have dealt with it. I mean, I think self-care as a performer, really for anyone, but when you're dealing with people on that kind of level where it can be pretty intense, You have to be really clear with your boundaries. And I've done some work on energetic boundaries and with several different people in terms of keeping very clear boundaries, having ethical boundaries with people. And also, I think that's, partially why we both tend to be pretty protective of our private life and of our family life. And just more being introverted as we are, just being more mindful of that when we're going into a public performance. You're there to help people and to work with them and to facilitate. But having those clear boundaries really helps to keep from inadvertently maybe taking on something from somebody else or, along those lines. Keeping it very clear. I think it really depends what they're interested in. If people approach us, for healing work or therapeutic work when it comes to our music, we will definitely facilitate that. But, having those conversations in terms of what is expected from the experience, we're definitely comfortable with that in terms of, being honest with people. If, they're looking for something in terms of a miracle, we basically just really communicate the fact that we're there to facilitate, and then what happens as a result of that is what it is. There's no promise of any sort of cure or guaranteed result or experience. It's really just what happens for people in the moment, and for some people, depending on where they're at, it's going to mean something entirely different, maybe on a deeper level than someone else. It's not for us to in any way try and regulate or, control.
Do you work online as well?
Yes, we have. We've done at least one service over Zoom in the last several years. I do a lot of teaching online, but yeah, we do online stuff as well.
How can people find you?
They can find us via our website, belcantoduo.com, or my website or David's website. We're also on Facebook. If you want to look up Bel Canto Duo, I think it's -2 if you put in the whole thing, but basically Bel Canto Duo on Facebook. That's probably the best way to reach out to us, that way. So. Well, as a parent, yes, we're always teaching this. But in terms of different areas and energetic work, yes, we're talking about that. We also do musical stuff with them. They both play piano and violin, so.
But they have private teachers for that.
Yeah, that relationship in terms of parent, I always ask the girls, I say, do you want my mom hat or my teacher hat? Which one would you like? What are you asking for right now? And then they can respond. It's usually the mom hat, but.
David, looking back to 2016 when you met Darci, in retrospective, it's been, almost 6 years? How would you describe these years?
Wonderful, really. A growing experience. I've gained more of an appreciation of life and music and collaboration. And I've also learned a lot from the children and watching them grow. It's been wonderful.
What are the plans for this year?
To keep striving for, you know, even a broader musical experience and excellence in our playing, and you know, to embrace and enjoy life, and to take our music to many places. We really want to travel and play wherever we can. Our ultimate goal for the end of the year is to end up in Europe to hopefully see some of my family I haven't seen in a while, and to start trying to connect with some different people and take our music abroad as well.
Yeah, I think ultimately we see ourselves trying to live at least part of the year in Portugal, Europe. David's family is in Spain, and so we're starting to work on, you know, building tours in Europe as well as throughout the US here, and possibly the rest of North and South America, but one day at a time. For people that are invested in learning, that lifelong journey that we're all in, I think Ram Dass said we're all walking each other home, right? So this idea that, you know, we're in it together, I think it's important to focus on that we are in it together, that you're not alone, and then also to not be afraid to try new things, to go after, you know, something that you've always wanted to do. It's so easy to let fear kind of drive the bus, so to speak. They can certainly, you know, ride along, but maybe in the third row, not in the driver's seat. That's what I would say, is just to really don't be afraid to try new things, to take a risk, okay, and to just go for it.
David, do you have a mantra or proverb or a saying that motivates you?
I can't say that I do really. I just kind of wake up and, you know, I've had a lot happen in my life. I'm just happy to be alive and be around good people and try to provide music. I communicate best through music. So my mantra might reside in my playing and how I play, but I don't have a saying or anything that I do every day.
Is there an activity that you do together besides music and soothes you?
We love to explore nature, and in particular, we both started seeing birds of prey, eagles, and a lot more wildlife when we were became together.
Yeah, since we met, we've seen a number of eagles and different amazing experiences in nature. That's something we really
and we love
enjoy.
To walk and hike
and find restorative.
Yeah, and travel and see all of the world that we can, especially outdoors.
We're very lucky.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.